Brought to you by BedroomBattlefields.com, this is the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast. Get your tissues at the ready, folks. This one's a real tearjerker. We've all heard those rare stories about someone going into their local second-hand shop and picking up a solid gold copy of Hero Quest for 60 pence. But what about the much more common story of the guy who used the pages of his original Rogue Trader book to line the bottom of his gerbil's cage? This Question of the Month episode is all about hobby heartbreak, the stuff you once owned that you either lost, sold or gave away. The books, games and miniatures you'd do almost anything to bring back into your collection. So take a deep breath, grab some comforting food or drink and let's get into it.
Hello, it's Callum here, aka Dr. Spork. This particular question is a bit of a sore point for me, as I daily wish I hadn't got rid of my entire collection. Like a lot of people, I left the hobby behind as I reached my late teens, thinking that I'd outgrown it and was now a grown-up. I'd amassed quite a large collection with armies of orcs and goblins, space wolves and space orcs, and a bunch of random models that I'd bought just because I thought they looked cool. There are so many models that I wish I had now. There was the beautifully painted early Skaven models that I inherited from my brother, which they could have been on the heavy metal pages of the kind of mid to late 80s White Dwarfs. They were absolutely wonderful. As my favourite sculpt by Kev Adams, which is the Gorfang Rockgut, the Orc War Boss from Fantasy. It's the quintessential orc, whether it be Fantasy or 40k. And the Rogue Trader era Lehman Russ model that I had specially cast after he was out of production. Games Workshop cast for me, and he had both his wolves and everything, and I spent ages trying to paint him. It was beautiful. In fact, the only thing I actually have left from my original stint in the hobby is a model of Bilbo Baggins that I gave to my dad as a present, and he has dutifully kept for the last 2 decades plus. I suppose I should pick one that I wish I'd kept, and that would be my heavily converted Space Orc Blood Axe War Boss, Big Knob Grimshag, a name that shows I was a spotty teenager when I christened him. Anyway, that's all long gone. Sold to a junior doctor called Lewis for 50 quid. So Lewis, if you are out there and happen to be listening to this wonderful podcast and still have a heavily converted Meganob with a peaked cap and oversized epaulets and a 2CV engine on his back, get yourself over to the Bedroom Battlefields Discord server. I would love to even just see pictures of him again. You can also find me on Mastodon as Dr_Spork at Warhammer.social, where you can see my recent recreation of Big Knob Grimshag from my hazy memories of what he was. Or if you're into 3D printing, look up Dr. Spork on Cult 3D, where I have a bunch of old Hammer-inspired designs. Thank you again, Matthew, for the wonderful podcast, and I'm very, very much looking forward to catching up with you at Bring Out Your Lead later in the year.
This is Luke from Michigan. The thing I most regret getting rid of, or wish I still had, is really almost all of my old Warhammer stuff and Warhammer 40k stuff from the 90s. Old metal dreadnoughts, and I had a whole Empire army that was fully painted, and this stuff I fell out of the hobby, and like many people sold it real cheap just to get rid of it and to get $100 for something that could go for, gosh, I don't even know, 10 times that today. And it's too bad. I have no desire to play 40k or Warhammer Fantasy anymore. At the time, I just didn't know about all the miniature agnostic games. And if I had known that at the time, I think I probably would have kept that stuff. So I do miss it sometimes, but hey, life goes on, and I haven't stopped buying miniatures, so we'll get more.
the hobby-related thing that I most miss is my copy of Rogue Trader rulebook from when I was a kid. Absolutely love reading through that with all the rich and deep narrative things on there. I remember a story about people having to go on sort of speeders through the desert fighting off marauding people, and the passengers had to take up guns as part of their fare, and that sort of thing really sort of made everything in the Warhammer universe alive for me when I was just a little kid. And then sort of reading through that, building my original Space Marines and putting them on a Fisher-Price garage as their base in the games that we used to kind of pretend to play and roll some dice that made no sense.
Hey, Matthew. This is Cam, Cam of Warwick on the Discord. And the one model I would like to have back the most, if I could get it back, would be from a second edition Warhammer 40k Space Orc army that I gave away back in the late 90s. You and I talked about this on a podcast you did months and months ago, so I won't rehash all the reasons why I got rid of it, but the short of it was that at the time I was associating the hobby with making bad financial decisions. So I gave away almost all of my stuff to a guy I knew who was still playing the game. And that was back in 1998. And unfortunately, I don't know what happened to them from there, so they're just lost to the warp. But the model I missed the most from that army is the Rogue Trader Space Orc Dreadnought. I had 3 or 4 of these things, and I love them because they're just kind of comically terrifying in their appearance. They're vaguely egg-shaped, almost like squat exo armor, but with longer legs, and their power claws are rounded off, kind of like lobster claws, and kind of goofy, but capable of ruining your day, which was sort of the theme of the orcs back then. The base model came with just 2 body sections, and they sent you 2 power claws and a las cannon, so you'd have to decide if you wanted to equip your dreadnought with 2 power claws or 1 claw and a ranged weapon. Then if you wanted a larger dreadnought, you could buy an expansion set that gave you a 3rd body section, 2 more power claws, a set of short legs, I guess for some variety, and another heavy weapon that you picked a la carte from either las cannon, heavy plasma, heavy bolter, or grenade launcher. And the expansion set also came with the Gretchen pilot, which the advertisement actually calls an orc operator, but it's definitely a Gretchen. But it's this little Gretchen model, kind of mummified in cables that you stick inside the dreadnought model, and his head's poking out from it. And the reason I had so many of these guys is because I was using the Freebooters manual for my army lists. And for just 60 points, you got a Mech Boy, a Pain Boy, and the Dreadnought. And then you could buy as many more Dreadnoughts as you wanted for 40 points each. So these guys cost like a third of what the Space Marine Dreadnoughts cost. The Freebooters manual had a lot of charts. So after you bought the Dreadnought, you would roll a 1d6 to see how many modifications you got. So up to 6. And then you would roll on another chart to see what the modifications were, and they potentially could stack. And so like on a roll of a 1, you got a custom heavy weapon. On a 2, you got a force field of your choice. On a 3, you got an extra arm fitted with a heavy weapon, which was generated from another chart on the Freebooters equipment list, which was like that was a D100 chart. A 4 got you a Scorcher turret. A 5 got you the Squig gas injection cylinder, which lets you move the Dreadnought for double speed for 1 turn. But if you got multiple of those, you could have, a Dreadnought running around the field with a 12-inch move. And then a 6, if you rolled a 6 on a modification chart, it says the Dreadnought has been fitted with loudspeakers and a tape recorder so that it can blare out gothic rock at the enemy while it blasts them. This has no effect on its combat performance, but has plenty of entertainment value for the orcs. So yeah, it was a real orky model. So sometime around the COVID lockdown, I decided I wanted to acquire another one of these dreadnoughts. So I put it on my eBay watch list and kept it there for about, I don't know, like 3, maybe 4 years, trying to find one for less than $75, which I thought was a pretty generous price tag. I thought for sure if I was patient, I could find one for a steal. But I bid on a few and lost. And then finally I found one for buy it now at $75, but that didn't include the shipping. So it was over my budget. But I thought, you know what? I'm a grown man. I can spend my money on this tiny robot if I want to. So I went ahead and bought it. And then a fellow from the Crown of Command Discord, Pygmy Hippo, he sent me a heavy flamer because all I had was 2 las cannons. So he sent that to me for free so I could have some variety, which was super nice of him. I haven't painted this model yet, and for a while I was thinking to myself, am I not painting this thing because it was my Grail model for so long? And once I paint it, I'll be done with it. It'll be done. I'll have to find a new Grail model. But then I got to thinking that I could use this model for a construct for Frostgrave. Once I've got all the parts magnetized, I could just remove the ranged weapons and then kit bash like an axe arm or something and put that on one of the upper body sections and put a power claw on the lower body section so it would look like he'd grab you with the claw and then whack you with the axe a few times. So I realized my procrastination about painting it wasn't really about it being a Grail model, but because I really didn't have a use for it. But with Frostgrave, I've got an excuse to build a construct now, so I'm excited to get some paint on the guy. But anyways, thanks for the podcast, Matthew. I really appreciate the work you put into it. I love having a hobby-related podcast to listen to while I'm painting, so keep up the good work, man.
Hey, Matthew. This is Ryan, Don Juan Don from the Discord, and this is my response to the question of the month for June 2024. So you would wanted to know what hobby-related thing did I once own and wish I could get back? And I think there are a handful of good answers to this, but I think for me, the top of my list is what I would consider my first real, quote unquote, wargaming force. Real being something that, I assembled and painted and I had never played a, hobby style war game up until this point. And it started with the launch box for the Legion of Everblight when Hordes by Privateer Press was first released. So kind of the backstory of a buddy of mine named Ben, whom I had known since elementary school. He and I had recently reconnected and we were playing board games off and on. And he reached out and asked me if I'd be interested in getting into this game that he and another friend were starting. He gave me the details, kind of some information about what War Machine was at the time and what was going to be different about Hordes and, how they'd still be compatible and that kind of thing. And I knew very little about wargaming at the time, but, I said, what the heck, and just kind of jumped in with both feet. We all chose different factions and Everblight was still up for grabs. So I grabbed that one. And when the box came, I immediately cracked it open. I'd done some model assembly, so the assembly wasn't too scary, but I knew nothing about painting models. Anything I had done was either not painted or pre-painted or, that kind of thing. So, I painted it just incredibly poorly. I didn't realize it was that bad until I showed up to our first game and saw what the other guys were playing with. And went, whoa, I'm out of my league here. I was just using craft paints and had no guidance whatsoever. So after a few games, and our group knew that this was my first rodeo. After a few games, I stripped the models and repainted them to be a little nicer, but they were still only a half step above, two other people. So, it was kind of my first force and definitely represented that when you looked at it. Over the next year or so, we continued playing off and on. I added to it, learned all about expanding my collection and, reading about the game and forums, and I really got into it. Eventually, our group, kind of our kitchen table group died out, and at the time I saw no reason to keep any of them. So I sold them on eBay, and got decent money for them. Hordes was burning pretty hot at that time, and there are, I guess that kind of ends that tale. There are a lot of things from my hobby days gone by, but this small collection of models remains my most regretful sale. Whenever I'm painting or playing with a new person in the hobby, I always stress to them that they should never ever sell their first painted models, and kind of give them the elevator pitch of my tale of woe here that I've now shared with you. I've considered picking up an Everblight box because they still sell the boxes. I think they're probably plastic at this point, or they have a metal, just to slap some paint on, and really do them justice. Still not a great painter, but I'm definitely better than I was back then. But I fear it won't be the same because they're not the models, right? So that's that's probably the top of, still remains the top of my list of things I wish I could get back. Thanks for the great question. I thought this was an awesome question, and the opportunity to respond. Really fun to share this and to get to record something. And if there's anybody new to the hobby who's listening right now, I guess I'll blow it out to your millions of fans. Never sell your first models. Never. Thanks. This has been Ryan. Thanks, Matthew. Bye.
Hi, this is Mark. The thing that I don't have anymore that I wish I could get back was a Citadel miniatures catalogue, which I got free for subscribing to White Dwarf. So I bought White Dwarf for a few issues and I really liked it and I was getting into it. So I asked for subscription for Christmas that I got. And by subscribing, they also sent me these 2 Citadel miniatures catalogues. And they were really weird how they were put together. They've got holes in them for like a ring binder, and you could separate them out from the binding and put them into a ring binder. I don't really know why, but I decided that I wanted to do this. It's the kind of thing you get, I suppose, for a catalogue that you might have in a shop, where you put it in the binder and people would flick through and decide what they want to buy. But I put it into this ring binder, and I was busily doing this and putting it in and looking at all the pages and making decisions about all these things I wanted to buy. And I put it down by the side of my bed one night, and I'd left the rings open. And I got into bed and I fell asleep. And in the morning I woke up and I swung my legs out of bed enthusiastically, bearing in mind I had a cabin bed, so this was about 5 feet above the ground. And I leapt out of bed and landed directly on the 2 open rings of the ring binder, causing a jet of blood to come flying out of my foot, spoiling my Citadel miniatures catalogue and also causing me great pain in the process. The Citadel miniatures catalogue did not survive, in spite of trying to wipe it off with tissues. It was for the bin, and I never got it back. And I would dearly love to have that, along with all the other millions of Games Workshop things that I bought and then just slung and didn't have any more. But that was the one that I ruined at the time, and I was very angry about.
Hi, Matthew. It's Josh here from the Chrono Command podcast. And firstly, thank you very much for your wonderful, entertaining shows and interviews you have usually each week. So I really appreciate that, mate. And I'm an avid listener to your podcast. Great question for June. And I started thinking about what thing I would love to have back that I had in my youth that I foolishly sold or gave away. I don't know actually what happened to it. I think I sold it. But it was the Ultramarines game. And it was part of a series, I think 4 different games. You had Ultramarines, Dungeon Bowl, Space Fleet, and I think the other one was Dragon Quest, which I've never seen. But each of those games were kind of a sort of a glimpse as to what the bigger games were. So Ultramarines was kind of a very easy way to get into Games Workshop products using miniatures, dice, and essentially play Space Hulk, but a very, very broken down, very easy way to just get into with just 2 pages of rules. You're in, and it's really fun and fast. And It was just like a gateway drug into Games Workshop products. So that was my second game after buying HeroQuest, as it looked interesting, and I didn't have anything for 40k related in terms of dungeon crawling. I love dungeon crawling after playing HeroQuest. So I thought I'd give it a go, and it was a massive hit. So all my friends at school, this is like my last year of high school, during Schoolies Week in Australia, which is basically a week off where kids usually get drunk and that kind of thing, but us nerds were playing Ultramarines all weekend at a friend's house as I introduced this game to these guys, and they loved it, and we just played that continuously because they were into Space Crusade and all that kind of thing, because those games were obviously around that time released back then. So they were all into 40k especially. So Ultramarines was just a wonderful way for them to play essentially scouts, because you had a group of 5 scouts in each team, and there were 4 of those for each different chapter. And you would battle it out in the Space Hulk using the Space Hulk tiles, collecting resources, and those resources you bring back to your home base, and then the player with the most resources wins the game. But during that gameplay, you had these event cards that you could play to disrupt your other players from claim their objectives. You would shoot and try to kill the other scouts. It's kind of like a training mission, if you like to think, or a simulation, if you like to think it in the 40k universe. It was a pretty great game, and the thing that was its sort of hallmark in terms of mechanic, I think maybe Jervis Johnson made these games from memory, but inside the box cover lid was this targeting template. So basically it was just a grid of 9 boxes with hit and miss written on it, and you would hold the dice. If you're firing your heavy bolter and it had 5 dice, you'd hold it above the box exactly 30 centimeters. You'd have to watch the players how far they'd hold it up above the box, and when they release the dice would fall into these squares with a number on it, and that will say if it's a hit and what the score was. So maybe you needed a 4 to hit or what have you, and that's how many times you'd hit the other guy. And that's the only thing I remember about it. It was like a 2-page rule book. It wasn't very long, but it was such a fun game. I'd really wished, if there's one thing I'd want to get back, it'd be that, because it'd be great to play with the guys, and my son, as kids, would love to. It's easy for kids to get into and play it, and that's the thing I'd love to get back if I ever had a chance. So thanks again, Matthew, for your wonderful podcast and for the guests you bring on. I really look forward to the next one, mate. Take care.
If you're in the market for a t-shirt, mug, sticker or magnet with Goblin Green bases written on it, then today is your lucky day. We've teamed up with TeePublic to create a merch store for the podcast, which you could visit by going to bedroombattlefields.com/store. So go and get yourself some Goblin Green bases branded merch today, and bonus points if you send in a photo of you being escorted out of your local Games Workshop. That's bedroombattlefields.com/store. And now, back to the show.
So, I was probably 8 years old, in Basingstoke in southern England. Tourist destination for all, I'm sure. And I was being allowed to join in a Games Workshop event day for some reason. My mum had dropped me off thinking I was allowed to be there as some kind of childcare. I'm sure the staff appreciated that. Poor souls. Nonetheless, they incorporated me into a big game, and they said I can take over just one particular character. It was a big game of Warhammer 5th edition, mid-90s, and I was that Lord Croak precursor, that massive intergalactic psychic frog with 4 blokes holding him up because he's too fat. And it was great. I had no idea whatsoever what was going on. It was just mayhem of dice. And apparently, I won the game. How, why, or when, I have no idea. So those good souls in the red jumpers decided, the little laddie, let's give him something. And they got out a promotional poster for 5th edition that they'd had. And it must have been larger than A1 size. It was a massive poster, bigger than normal posters that you'd get in HMV or anything like that. It was a massive poster, 3/4 the length of my bed. And I treasured it, absolutely loved it, because it was the artwork for 5th Ed starter box, the 5th Ed game box, with that fantastic Bretonnian knight charging in on those lizards. Massive piece of art. Absolutely treasured it. Well, I had it for maybe a year, and then I won't say I was conned because I was just stupidly young, didn't know what I was doing. But a mate, in inverted commas, one of those people that you accumulate around you, that aren't necessarily friendly to you, but you keep them around for some reason when you're young, anyway. And he was saying, "Oh, you should swap some things with me, and you can have some better minis and all that." All right, young and impressionable, whatever you want. What you want to swap then? Poster, blah blah blah, and all that. He got a lot more than I did, and I lost the poster forever. No idea what's ever become of it. Never found it again on eBay. Presumably because it was a promotional piece. They probably didn't make that many. It was meant to be for the store. Yeah, I really regret losing that. I'd love to still have it. I'd have it up on my stairs. My missus is very, very, very good to me to let me have a few artworks on the stairs as it is. That was particularly big, so I'm not sure how I should go on that one. But I absolutely adored it, and I missed that.
Hello, Matthew. Another excellent podcast as usual. This is James Humakti from the Discord server. An interesting question this month, and one that I'm currently exploring. The very thing that I wish that I had kept from back in the day is something that I'm looking at right now on my painting desk. When the Lord of the Rings films came out, and the miniatures that came out at the time, that was what got me into miniature painting to begin with. I don't know how I first saw it or what shop I was in, but I do remember that I was an avid collector. I would earn some money, I would get on my bicycle and ride over to a little shop, and I would purchase blister after blister. And I would paint and just enjoy the joy of painting. I never actually played the game. In fact, I'm not even entirely sure that I understood that there was a game. But I did enjoy the painting side of it. There came a point, though, I think 2005, 2006, where I started to think that I was, mature and older, and that I needed to spend my money on other pursuits. So I started to sell them off. I sold my Balrog. I sold my Fell Beast. I sold almost everything except for a one-armed Treebeard, one-armed Aragorn, a one-armed Gandalf, and the rest of the Fellowship. And I kept them in a box. And I only took them out of that box about 3 months ago. And I have been repainting them and making purchases and trying to recapture some of the things that I had back in the day. And my wife and children bought me the Balrog for Father's Day, and I have been starting the painting on that. It's been great. Something that I didn't realize quite how much I had missed. And a bit of a circle, because I got back into painting and started painting all kinds of things last year. But I didn't realize that I would actually get back into my first love when it came to painting. Now, there's a little addendum to this story that I think it was about 2007. I was in a charity shop and I saw that someone had an entire box of the Two Towers. I think it was the core set with the Riders of Rohan and all that in it. But they had actually added a bunch of other sets in there as well. And I looked at it. I thought, that looks nice. And then I put it back. Probably one of the worst decisions of my life. Kind of silly, but I wish I could go back and grab that box out of my hands and run off with it. Thanks for the question, and thank you again for the podcast. Excellent as ever.
Hi, it's Ed from Sussex and the Discord group. And the thing that I miss that I once had, there's two things really. One was my Chaos Marine army, which was more or less painted. I had a very cool army filled with Chaos Terminators and Devastators and all sorts of bits and pieces. I found a few bits and pieces for it, but a lot of it, still no idea where it is. It's somewhere in my parents' house, I believe, unless it got thrown out, which if it did, it'd be a great shame because there were some nice, cool pieces. There was a Baden spoiler and quite a few bits of his Black Legion, which I used to lead against my Ultramarines, who had a few Imperial Guard to back them up. And that was quite a lot of fun. But sadly, they are not to be found. But the other, and probably the thing that I miss even more, is my copy of Space Hulk. I miss that so much. I really want to play that game. I remember it being so much fun, and have played it since. I lost it with someone else's copy, and guess what? It is really good fun. It's such a good game. So hopefully one day that will turn up somewhere in my parents' house. If not, maybe I will try and recreate it somehow, make some dungeon tiles and get hold of some models and actually remake it, because I've probably got the dice, and the rest of it I think could be homemade. So yeah, and I'm sure there's some rules or something for it on the internet somewhere, so it shouldn't be too hard to do. But it sounds like a project for another day. I've got enough bits and pieces on at the moment for my hobby. But anyway, those are the things that I once had that I miss, and can't wait to hear what everyone else is missing.
Kia ora, Matthew. My name's David Fraser. I'm calling from Wellington, New Zealand. Big fan of the show and all the good work that you're doing on this podcast. The first time I've answered one of these call-in voice surveys. So I guess for me, what I wish I still had was the original 1989 copy of Hero Quest, which my brother and I owned when we were young lads, and really enjoyed that game. But over the years, various pieces got cannibalized for different types of projects, and I distinctly remember snipping up the weapon rack for God knows why. But yeah, bits and pieces just went missing. The game itself, I have no idea where that ended up. Somewhere probably in my parents' garage, probably was sold or given away or thrown out at some point back in the early 2000s. I wish I still had it, because it's a great game and would be one game I'd be really willing to sort of introduce my kids to. So yeah, amen for Hero Quest.
Hey Matthew, this is Darren from Melbourne in Australia, Razorback 88 on the Discord. Just replying to your question of the month about something that you wish you had back. There's probably three things I kind of wish that I still had, and that was the original plastic set of Space Marines that GW bought out way back, probably late 80s, I think, early 90s. First major sort of plastic models that I ever built and painted. Second thing was the Realm of Chaos hardback, the first one they bought out. I wish I still had that. I've got a replacement copy that I managed to buy when I was overseas, but I still wish I had the original. And the third thing was a metal Juggernaut of Khorne, still in its blister pack. I'd never opened the blister and assembled it, but it was just this huge chunk of metal. One of those solid models that GW used to make, where it was a hefty beast. I really liked the pose on it. It was pretty basic, but it was a nasty looking beast for sure. What happened to them? Well, back in the day, I was living at home and I had a massive collection of stuff, and then eventually I moved out of home, got a job interstate in Australia, and had to leave pretty quickly, and I didn't leave any instructions for my parents with what I wanted to do with all the stuff. And then Dad decided to have a big clean out, and most of my stuff got donated to charity. So I'm hoping that stuff that ended up in charity got picked up by somebody who got some joy out of it. They didn't throw away everything, thankfully. I've still got some of the old models that I used to have, but I wish I could get back those plastic Space Marines, that hardback of Realm of Chaos, and that metal Juggernaut. But as I said, here's hoping somebody else managed to pick it up and get some joy from it. Love the podcast. Been listening for a long time. This is my first reply to your question of the month, and I hope it fits all the criteria. Keep up the good work. Thanks, mate.
Hello. This is Darren, Narad on the Discord, calling from California again. So my story is one that probably only the fans of this particular podcast would appreciate. But it's about the Realms of Chaos book, the original one with Khorne. So I didn't play a lot of Warhammer battles, or barely any at all. I had the book. I think it's the 3rd edition one. Never played it. They had some minis, but I was an RPGer, so I played Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay a bunch. In middle school, I ran the Enemy Within campaign. And so I liked buying RPG books, so I bought the original Realms of Chaos book just because it looked so awesome. And probably never used it, but looked at it a ton. And then years later, there was this sketchy friend of a friend. We all played D&D for a while, and he was the sketchy guy that was basically, he was like a meth addict, I think is what it was. He was like my buddy's close friend, not really my close friend, but we kind of felt sorry for him, and he loved that I had that book, and he borrowed it. And he was living at maybe his girlfriend's, living with his girlfriend above his girlfriend's dad's garage or something. And because he was a sketchy dude, I think he got kicked out of that place, and I never saw the book again. So sad. So he borrowed it because he wanted to like copy. He wanted to like trace the art in it and stuff. And I never saw that book again because of that, and I still regret it, and I still miss that book. It's like the book that got away. Still have all my other old stuff. Got the original old WFRP book and all that, but I missed the Realms of Chaos book. So that's the one that got away. So that's my story.
And on that cheery note, we'll move towards brighter thoughts. It's the question of the month for July 2024. And this time around, I'm asking the question, what are your favourite hobby-related content channels? Obviously, aside from this one, what other podcasts, blogs, YouTube channels or social media accounts most resonate with your little corner of the hobby? And while you're at it, let's also hear about any of your own channels. What do you use to document your project? Do you have a podcast yourself? Is it a blog? An Instagram account? Tell us all about it in the July question of the month. So if you're listening at the time of recording, I need these in by Tuesday, the 30th of July. You could go to bedroombattlefields.com/voicemail to record directly into the website, or you could record it separately and email it to me at hello@bedroombattlefields.com. So once again, that question is about your favourite hobby-related content channels, from podcasts, blogs, YouTube channels, social media accounts, the ones that most resonate with your own perception of your hobby. And as ever, I really look forward to hearing your responses to this one. I think we could put a great list together of a lot of different content channels, and it'll maybe expand our own horizons as well. So please get them in as soon as you can. Alright, that's just about it for this episode of the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast. Thanks so much to everyone who submitted to this month's question of the month and made this episode possible. Like I say, get your answers in for July as well, and we'll talk before then, obviously, on the next episode.